Hey everyone, this is Kevin from the chesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be going over the McDonnell Gambit in the King's Gambit. King's Gambit starts out e4, e5, pawn to f4. This is my favorite chess opening of all time. If you watch my videos for a while, you definitely know this about me. And after the pawn takes, knight to f3, pretty common variation from here. Pawn g5, bishop here to c4, pawn to g4, attacking the knight here. And now this is where the McDonnell Gambit comes into play. And if you're like me, if you have a favorite chess opening, you usually have different lines that you like to play against your opponents. My main line that I go to is the Muzio Gambit, and that's castling here on the king side. Pawn takes, queen takes here on f3. And white has a very strong attack, but I also really like to play the McDonnell Gambit, and that says, let's not castle on the king side right away. Instead, let's just get more material involved into the game. So if you haven't played knight to c3, I definitely recommend it. In this video, we're going to be looking at the accepted line. That is pawn taking here on f3. There are other variations that black may decide to play. It does not have to take here on f3. And actually, I think there's some very good lines that black has without just taking this knight here on f3. Not going to be going over that in this video, but when this video, hopefully this video at some point, reaches 25,000 views, that's going to be my signal to say go ahead and make the decline line. So definitely show your support for the video. Share this with your friends. As soon as it hits 25,000, I'll go ahead and make that decline line. But in this one, we are going to be looking at pawn takes here on f3. Same as you would expect in the Muzio Gambit. The queen's going to come to f3 and take here. And then we're going to be looking at different lines. The first one is d6. Pretty common theme. Ever since the days back, and Bobby Fischer said, hey, King's Gambit, all you have to do is play d6 from black and you can pretty much win. So that's one variation we're going to be looking at. The second one's going to be knight to f6. Pretty standard opening from black here. We're going to look at d5, just trying to blow up the entire center of the board. And then something that used to be looked at is, queen here on f3, attacking the pawn, bishop to h6, trying to hold on to that pawn here on f4. First variation we are going to look at is d6. White's just going to castle on the king side. You can start to see the queen and the rook lining up here on this f-file. This bishop here on c4 also eyeing down this f7 square. So a lot of pressure on black eventually. None of the material here on this 8th rank have moved for black. Now, black was able to capture that knight, was able to capture that pawn here on f4, although we've captured one of those pawns back. But you can see that black may decide, hey, we're up in material here. Let's go ahead and start to exchange off. So this bishop here on c4 is a huge threat, eyeing down this f7 square. They could play maybe bishop to e6. Okay, well, now there's just going to be an exchange. And after this right here, then queen to h5 check. That pawn here on f7 is no longer being able to defend this king. The king has to move, no other square. And so while white doesn't have the pawn here on f2, you can still see that the white king is pretty safe. And this black king on d7 is going to be chased for the rest of the game here. d4, you can see this does open up to attack this pawn here on f4 from the bishop here. It doesn't matter if the king comes to d7 or e7. I think both of these white's just going to be looking to play pawn to d4. Now, maybe they don't want to trade off it and they see the exchange and they say, okay, that's not going to work out really well for me. Maybe knight to f6. Well, in this case, yeah, we're just going to be playing pawn to d4. This bishop here is attacking the pawn. They can't really hold on to this pawn at all. Bishop to h6 does absolutely nothing because the bishop, queen, and rook from white are eyeing down. So it's just too much material here because now just bishop takes here on f4 and black just kind of sits there and realizes, okay, I just wasted a move. I can't actually defend that material. So maybe they play something else. Maybe bishop to e7. Okay, well, now the queen just takes here on f4, and you can start to see white definitely controls the center of the board. Black isn't going to be castling on the queen side anytime soon. The king side safety is kind of blown up after the pawn from the g file is gone. So that's definitely going to be tough. You could also see maybe rook to g8, just trying to control this semi-open G file, but now the bishop takes here on f4. So we said before, white has two central pawns. The bishops both are controlling the center of this board. It just seems very difficult for black to stop all of the threats that white has. Now, maybe black doesn't play bishop to f6. Maybe instead bishop to g7, just trying to control the center of the board here. White's just going to take here on f4. But this does open up for bishop to d4 check. Doesn't really matter too much. King to h1 is just a nice little safety here. And then maybe knight to f6, knight to d5, attacking the knight here. What's nice here is that there's a real threat here. Yes, the bishop on c4 was attacking the pawn, but also there's this barrel right here. And if the knight takes, that's going to be checkmate right here. Can't take that. So what other options do they have? Maybe in this case, they play bishop to e6. But now just knight takes here on f6. Maybe the bishop takes. You see the exchange on the board. At the end of the day, I think this is going to be completely fine for white. Going into the endgame, up a pawn in material also has the bishop, which is going to be able to really control a lot of the game, where this knight is not going into the endgame nearly as strong as that bishop. If we come back a few moves, bishop to e6, just looked at that variation. Maybe knight to d7. I do think that this makes some sense, just because this knight is defending the knight here on f6. So trying to solidify something here from all the critical squares that white is controlling. White can just slowly start to chip away here. Pawn to c3, forcing the bishop to come back. There's no real great squares. Bishop to e5 does attack the queen here. But then just queen to f3. Just bring it back a little bit. Still controlling the semi-open f-file. And you can start to see that black doesn't have a lot of great squares. The queen here on d8 is completely blocked in. Can't come to e7. That's still defended by this knight here on d5. You can see light square bishop's now completely blocked off. Black king here on e8. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to castle on the king side, but then that opens up a lot more threats here. And you can see the next move from white, you play pawn to d4, attacking this bishop, opening up for the dark square bishop to get involved into the game. Bring your rook over and start to attack on the king side of the board. I like this attack from white quite a bit. So that was if they play pawn to d6, what I do think is the most common line that you will see. But they could try some other random stuff. Knight to f6 here. I don't think it's the best option. You can just go ahead and capture here on f4. And then they're probably going to be looking to just play something in the center of the board with pawn to d6. And we've already looked at how to approach that. But if maybe something else, knight to c6 here, well, then you're just going to castle on the king side, eyeing down the same threats we had before on this f5 here with your queen, rook, and your bishop here on c4. And then maybe bishop to g7 from them, but then you just push forward e5. There's just so many threats. It's very difficult for them to deal with that. Maybe bishop here to c5, check. But then after the king moves here, there's just no real good way for them to continue. They're going to lose material here. Maybe rook to f8. We just take the knight here on f6. Just don't think they have many good options there. So instead, I think one that's more common you will see, instead of pawn to d6, you may also see pawn to d5. Black is up material. They got that knight there on f3, so they may say, let's just go ahead and blow up the center of the board. As long as I'm not cramped, I should have a good game. Knight takes here on d5, getting that material, but they do have open lines for their pieces. They just haven't moved anything on this 8th rank, which is part of the reason people like playing many of these lines in the King's Gambit. It's definitely why I like to. Just has so many aggressive pieces here. They could try to now attack the knight, just pawn to c6. We're just going to take the material on f4. Pretty easy decision for us. And even if they continue to attack us, maybe bishop to d6, getting more material involved into the game from them since they don't have anything else. But they really don't understand just how much we have as far as threats. Knight to g6 is a real threat because this threatens queen to f7 checkmate, but it also attacks the rook here on h8. They definitely have to deal with the checkmate first. So maybe queen to f6. But then we could just take with our knight here on h8. They're probably going to take our queen, and we take their queen back. Even if they take our knight right here, and they just say we'll go down 2 pawns of material, we just take with our queen right here. After the king moves, we can just exchange right here. Going into the endgame, we should be very good. Both sides have a bishop pair, and then we have a rook and a knight versus 2 rooks. We have more pawns than our opponent. Definitely should be an easy game for us. If we come back a few moves, and let's say they don't play that pawn to c6, maybe instead of attacking the knight, they look at it and say, let's just go ahead and get our knight involved into the game here. And we can just go ahead and take with our queen on f4. Keep the knight here. Great little outpost. If it's not being attacked, we don't have to move it. It was just pretty easy for us, if it was attacked, to go ahead and come back here to f4. But that's definitely an option. If they don't play pawn to the center of the board, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, bishop here to h6, trying to defend this pawn is one option. But really, white can just overwhelm that square. Pawn to d4. White's definitely controlling the center of the board. Opens up for the dark square bishop to attack that. No real good way for them to keep that pressure on. Knight to c6 here. White castles on the king side. Queen, rook, and bishop all eyeing down here. And the bishop here on h6 is really trying to defend this when black really needs to start opening up lines to counterattack in the center of the board and build up a stronger defense. This does not do that at all. So this is just an introduction to the McDonnell Gambit in the King's Gambit. My favorite opening. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't tried this out, maybe you've only been playing the Muzio Gambit, definitely recommend trying this knight to c3 at the beginning. Let me know what you guys think. Again, if we do get to 25,000, I will be making the decline lines just so you can see what happens. Hey, if they didn't take my knight on f3, what do I do? Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for the support. Let me know if there's any other extended lines in your favorite chess opening you would like me to make, and I just may make that in a future video. So thanks again. I'll see you guys in the next video.